so I've posted about them before, but this most recent story takes the cake. A while ago my cousin seemed to assume that because my future Phil is rich that I would rent her a luxury car on the day of her wedding because I did the same thing for my sister. Obviously, of course, it had to be a more expensive car than what my sister had. Naturally I refused, which caused her and my aunt to blow a gasket and insult me, my now fiancé, and my whole section of the family. I mostly found this amusing and mentioned it in passing to my sisters and other cousins, who informed me of all the truly awful things my cousin has done over the years. Eventually I spoke to my uncle about it all and he told her fiancé. I don't know details, but I found out the wedding is indefinitely postponed and her fiancé knows about the car incident if nothing else. This leads into the recent story. I got engaged recently and have been telling family members, so naturally my aunt and cousin found out. My cousin called me screaming so loudly I could hear her with my phone nowhere near my ear, saying things like how dare I steal her thunder and that I ruined her life so I could get married first. I later reviewed an email from my aunt demanding that I end my engagement until after my cousin has gotten married, as it is apparently disgusting I would subject her to this given the difficult time she is going through emotionally. Naturally my cousin thinks this is a wonderful idea. I should have been angry, but I couldn't stop laughing at the gall of these AH. I also told them to pound sand. Gotta love these people. Obligatory on a mobile, so sorry for formatting. So my girlfriend's parents are obscenely wealthy both in their own rights, but her father is literally worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Now on to the first part of the story. My sister got married a year ago and she had invited my GF's parents, as she's met them several times at family events, and because my GF and I are planning on getting married, wanted them to know they were already part of the family. They weren't able to make it but were touched by the gesture, so as a wedding present hired a Jaguar as a wedding car, which my sister and Bill loved. Fast forward to last night when I get a message from my cousin saying she wanted to talk and was coming over. She is getting married sometime next year and she told me she wanted a Lamborghini or Ferrari for her wedding car. I was confused because while my GF family is wealthy, she and I are not, or at least not enough. Our expensive items have all been from the occasional gift we get, is because my GF and I don't want to be dependent on her parents' money. After explaining that to my cousin, she got annoyed but was willing to settle for the same type of car my sister had. At this point I explained I hadn't gotten the car, it was a gift from my GF's parents. This is where her true colors showed. She turned around, her face lighting up, and said, "Oh, I'd forgotten they were rich. Looks like we can get the good cars after all." Not going to lie, I was pissed. I promptly informed my cousin that not only did my GF's parents not know her, but that my GF doesn't like her, and to be honest I don't either, and we weren't even going to the wedding, to which we hadn't even received a save the date for by that point. She is now furious with me and I have already received several angry messages from my aunt calling me a tight A who doesn't love my family, not wrong regarding specific members of said family to be honest, and that I'm ruining the whole day, as well as messages from my uncle and cousin apologizing for the outbursts as they are on my side. Personally I couldn't care less. Edit. Forgot to say my cousin's message was that she wanted to talk and was coming over. Sorry for the confusion. So this will likely be my last post about my cousin, as just about everyone in my family has had enough of her. To recap for people who haven't read my previous posts, this cousin demanded I rent an expensive car for her to use at her wedding, demanded I end my engagement after hers was postponed, told my family I had postponed my engagement in order to try and pressure me into going along with it. Those are just the highlights, there is more that she's done, but we would be here forever. My cousin's engagement went from being called off to having the entire relationship end due to her crappy behavior, and she's gone completely off the rails. She has found out that not only are my fiancé and I planning on getting married in late September, but we are planning on buying a house in the next 6 to 12 months, assuming we can find the time to do so obviously, and that not long after that we want to start trying for kids. Ladies and gentlemen, she ducking lost the plot. She called my fiancé screaming at her about how we are ruining her life deliberately and that we are so cruel for rubbing our happiness in her face. My fiancé gave me the phone and she shifted her attacks, accusing me of stealing her life and that I was only doing all this because she wasn't able to. I may have been a bit of a prick here, but I simply laughed and told her that I've never even considered her when planning my life. I hung up and we've blocked her, though she does still have our numbers obviously. Honestly, she's a complete lunatic. While I do feel slightly bad for her, everything that's happened has been because of her own choices. Hell, even her own father has turned around and said she needs to accept what her actions have caused. So there we go. I know people were interested in the last story, so I thought I'd share this here for you. My aunt, Dad's sister, has always been the textbook entitled B. When I was a kid, she never missed an opportunity to make me feel like garbage. From thinly veiled insults to outright verbal and emotional mistreatment, she threw what she could at me in an attempt to break me. Of course, the disgust she felt for me and the faults she found in my dad's parenting never stopped her from mooching stuff off of him or asking him for favors without ever giving anything in return. She and her husband considered their son to be a gift from the heavens, and he too grew up to be a narcissistic oppressor who loved to torment me, even though I was 7 years younger than him. My mom passed when I was 1 year old, and both my and grandmother had been offensive to her as well. But that's another tale for another time. This is about the time she, along with her son, ruined my 10th birthday. This incident resulted in me being put off of birthdays and deciding to never celebrate them again. I just couldn't see them as a cause for celebration. My entire extended family, which included the said aunt, uncle and cousin along with some other relatives, were at our home, and my dad and stepmom had gone out to run some errands. My cousin had invited some of his friends over, even though my dad and stepmom didn't know them. My dad allowed them to come after my aunt whined incessantly about how her son would be bored if his friends were not there. I remember sitting in my room and playing with my dog. I knew my cousin would be down there, and I usually did what I could to avoid him. At that time I suffered from a pretty bad stutter, and when I was upset or angry, it only got worse. This is something my cousin loved to make fun of, and of course, my birthday would be no different. He demanded that I come downstairs to talk to his friends. When I refused, his mother told me to stop being rude and do as I was told. I was a powerless kid, so I really had no other choice. I went down to the living room, and my cousin introduced me to his buddies in his usual condescending way, as the birthday girl. He handed me a novel and told me to read out loud. I tried to read properly, but failed. I was surrounded with judgmental stares, and it made me nervous. I stuttered, which is exactly what my cousin was hoping for. He and his friends began to snicker. I got angry and stopped reading. Cousin called me a freak. His friends look at me as though I was on display at a zoo exhibit. I wanted to prove them wrong, that I wasn't a freak, that I could read. I tried reading again. This time, on account of me being angry, the stutter was much worse. My cousin decided to mock my stutter, and all but one of his friends roared with laughter. The one that didn't actually noticed my tears and told the other to knock it off. He asked if I was okay. My cousin told him not to bother, it's just a joke, and that I was just an oversensitive baby. My rage was boiling over, and I threw the book at my cousin's face and stomped out. My aunt had seen what had happened and decided to pull me by my hair and drag me back to the living room. She told me to apologize to my cousin. I refused. She told me I needed to be taught a lesson for being a brat. I tried to tell her what had happened. She chuckled and said, "So what? He's your cousin and her older than you. You need to respect him. Now apologize." I refused again. This time with a no. "I hate you. I hate all of you." All the while crying and shaking with anger. This didn't sit well with Aunt, and she slapped me before asking me why I didn't just pass away in the womb. She told me I was a troublemaker just like my mother had been. That she knew the day I was born that there was something wrong with me. That an evil bee like my mother couldn't possibly produce a normal kid. This was it. I balled up my fist and connected it to my aunt's face. I punched that bee so hard, I busted her lip. By now, all the other relatives had heard the commotion and had gathered in the living room. The moment my fist connected with my aunt is when my dad and stepmom walked in through the front door. The aunt started fake crying. She berated my father for not raising me right and went on and on about how I was a violent, ill-mannered brat, etc., etc., etc. The other relatives too expressed their disappointment in me. My dad asked me what the hell I thought I was doing. I tried to tell him what my cousin had done and what my aunt had said about my mother. Unfortunately, my stutter reared its ugly head again, and all that came out of my mouth was gibberish. My tears were flowing again. In the meantime, my cousin had decided to take all his friends and bail. I was punished for my beastly conduct. My birthday celebration was cancelled. My dad called my friends and asked them not to come over. I didn't cut any cake. The presents I was to receive from my parents were stocked away. I was banished to my room and stayed there for the rest of the day. I ate lunch and dinner alone. The next morning, no one spoke to me. I was given my breakfast platter, which I ate in my room. That afternoon, my cousin's friend, the one who had told them to stop oppressing me, came over. He told my dad what my cousin had done and what my aunt had said. My dad sat me down and apologized to me, but added that it was still wrong of me to punch my aunt. I just sat there silently. I was emotionally numb. My dad kept telling me he loved me and that he was sorry. I just coldly stated at him. My stepmom suggested a belated birthday celebration. I refused. I told them I didn't want a birthday party and that I wouldn't celebrate my birthday ever again. I kept my word. Every year since that day, my parents would ask me what I wanted for my birthday and I always replied nothing at all. I would ask them not to get any cakes, and not to invite any guests. The day I was born now meant nothing to me. Even now, after all these years, I don't celebrate my birthday. Instead, I celebrate the day I landed the job that enabled me to move away from my family and start a new life. I consider it the day of my rebirth. It was the day I was able to leave all the pain and anger behind and could plan for a life that I would live on my own terms. My aunt and uncle's crappy parenting ended up costing them dearly. If you want to know what became of them, do let me know in the comments. It's pretty satisfying. Thank you for reading. Edit. I want to thank all of you for your kind words. I'm sorry I can't reply to each and every comment. But please know that your support means a lot to me. You people are amazing. I'll be posting about aunt and uncle's downfall within the next 24 hours. Stay tuned. This is the story of the downfall of my aunt and uncle. My aunt, Dad's older sister, has always doted on her son. I'm Indian and in my country son preference is a pervasive social disease. Most people, regardless of social status, religion etc. place great value in their sons and daughters are seen as a burden on the family. My aunt was no exception. Ever since she was a kid, she had had this messed up, one-sided competition with my dad. I, a woman, am my dad's only child. This gave her an opportunity to constantly make passive-aggressive remarks that my dad was so unfortunate to have a daughter, his line would end with him etc. etc. She and her husband spoiled their son to the point that he became a narcissistic oppressor. He would often mock my stutter, cheat on his girlfriends, and make unreasonable demands of his parents. But did they ever try to discipline him or say no to him? Of course not. Their prince could do no wrong. If he made fun of my stutter, I was a piece of trash who deserved it. If he cheated on his girlfriend, she must have neglected him. If he made sexist remarks about his female boss, well, he's a man. You get the picture? Years went by and he just kept getting worse. When he was living with them, he at least pretended to respect them. But when he landed a very high-paying job and was able to move out, it was as if he forgot they even existed. He and his wife hardly ever spoke to them. By now my uncle had retired. My aunt had never worked. They had very little money left as they had spent it all on their son. They had paid for his education, his vacations, his wedding. Now they barely had enough to put food on the table. My dad would help them as much as he could. In 2011, my cousin's wife became pregnant and during her third trimester, my cousin asked his parents to move in with him and his wife. We all knew it was because they wanted free caretakers for the baby. But my aunt just couldn't shut up about how wonderful her son was for wanting to take care of his parents. By now I was well established in my field and was looking forward to a successful career. She taunted my father one last time, saying my education and career would be of no use as I was just a daughter and could never take care of him the way her son would take care of her. My dad just smiled and wished her well. She and her husband moved to my cousin's, who lived in another place. My dad would often receive calls and texts from her bragging about what a great life they had. She sounded a bit too chipper. My dad began to suspect that all wasn't right. About 6 months after they had left, my dad said he was going to visit them as he was getting worried about his sister. He asked me and my stepmom to accompany him. We reluctantly agreed. We arrive at their place and it is truly stunning. A luxurious home in a posh locality. This was no surprise as my cousin is very successful. What did shock us was the way he was treating his parents. They were practically servants in his house. My aunt tended to the baby, cooked and cleaned. My uncle tended to the gardens, took care of the cars and went grocery shopping etc. My cousin could easily afford maids, drivers etc. But why would he when his parents were now his free slaves? What was even worse was the way he treated them. My cousin-in-law would often yell at my aunt and would just order her around. My uncle had this vacant and defeated look in his eyes. I had never liked him but couldn't help but feel a tinge of pity. My dad took my aunt aside and told her she didn't have to live like this. That he could make arrangements for her and her husband. My aunt put on a fake smile and said, "Nonsense, we couldn't be happier." Anytime my cousin or his wife said something cruel to her or told her to shut up when she tried to make conversation, my aunt would put on a smile and act as though it was just the sweetest thing anyone had ever said to her. It would have been funny, had it not been so pitiful. Memories of all the horrible things she had said and done to me and my dad were still fresh in my mind. And the schadenfreude was real. My aunt's fake, rueful smiles and the way she tried to cover up how her son was really treating her is the cringiest thing I have ever seen. My aunt and uncle often stressed the importance of having a male heir. They claimed that their son would be their provider while I, a daughter, would be a burden till the day I was married off. Surprise, surprise. The exact opposite has happened. While they were basically slaves in their son's house, I'm unmarried, have a loving partner, wonderful pets and friends and a great career. My dad has his own restaurant and seems very happy with his work. Entitled parents often assume that their kid can be an AH to everyone else, but he would never do that to them. Boy, are they in for a shock. Edit, my cousin hasn't completely escaped karma either. A few months ago, he got fired from his job. And his boss at his new place of employment is his ex-girlfriend whom he cheated on and dumped. All because he didn't like the fact that she was more successful than him. She's a wonderful person and won't misuse her power. But I'm sure working under his ex is eating my cousin alive.